Can you guys all see the presentation? Okay. Okay. Cool. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for adjusting your schedule to suit my class today. I'm super happy to be teaching this class. I think it's my third time delving into the topic of gallery structures. So, thank you so much to Vertical Crypto Art for bringing me back and teaching this. I really, really enjoy it, and I love all of the questions that you guys always introduce. Firstly, I want to say huge congratulations to all of you for joining Vertical Crypto Arts Residency. You're already starting with doing like exactly the right thing you need to do to become successful artists and to achieve your goal. I know that you can learn so, so much from Nicole and her team, and I've already learned so much from her. So yeah, congratulations, guys. I'll start off with just giving a little introduction about myself, and then we'll start delving into all of the content. So, firstly, my name is India. I am a project producer at Pace Verso. So, Pace Gallery, if you're not already aware, is a contemporary art gallery with like 9 locations internationally. It was established back in the 1960s. So a really historic gallery that represents artists like Alexander Calder and Mark Rothko, as well as more contemporary names like Jeff Koons and Maya Lin. So super excited to be working there. I joined the team back in January. Now, I got really into the history of art and specifically studying art and contemporary art world. When I was growing up, my mum was artist herself. She was very focused on doing like photorealistic drawings, which was not really in vogue like throughout the 80s and 90s when she was working. So I saw a lot of her kind of like struggling as an artist throughout my life. I then really fell in love with the history of art, and I studied that at university. I've worked in like various facets of the art world with my kind of I'm still like relatively at the beginning of my career, but I had done internships at David's Werner Gallery, specifically a sales internship. I worked in the 19th Century Pictures department at Christie's for work experience. I also did the internship at the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice before I really started my role at a gallery called Gazzelli Art House in 2020. And I really fell into the kind of NFT space there. Um, kind of kind of randomly, I had studied contemporary art like as part of my dissertation at university, and then I'd studied a course called Art After the Internet, and then the NFT boom really kind of pushed things off at this gallery, Gazzelli Art House, who historically had a very kind of strong focus on new media art. So I kind of spearheaded the NFT program there back in the day, and also ran like an online residency as well. So that was always really fun. And then, yeah, in January, I moved over to Pace. So that's a little bit of my background. You guys can ask me any questions about, any of those institutions. I've got one-on-one time. I've got a Calendly link that you can easily book an appointment on if you'd like. Okay, cool. So today we're gonna really cover the ins and outs of an art gallery, and just a disclaimer, I will be focusing on a contemporary art gallery. Um, and I'm also going to be delving into each of these topics very much kind of like as there's no real blueprint for what an art gallery is, and a lot of people's interpretations can be very different. So I'm very much speaking from my own experience and the interpretation of the other galleries and artists that I've worked with throughout my life. So we're going to delve into like basic definitions, and then we're going to discuss the role of the art gallery within the art world at large. So looking at a bit of like kind of how a gallery might function within auction houses, museums, art dealers, art advisors, like what all those different like institutions and kind of businesses, like what their functions really are. I feel like there tends to be quite a mystique around some of these spaces in the art world. We'll discuss a little bit about PACE and what we've been up to. And then we'll touch in on how Web3 and technology has been really changing what I think like traditional gallery structures have been historically and how it could impact the future. Would love some of you guys' inputs on this. And then we will touch on how to begin a relationship with an art gallery and end with any questions. I know that you guys also tend to, I'm not like, are you writing any questions in the chat? Should I be looking at the chat at all? No? Okay, cool. If you have any questions, can you let me know out loud because I don't have Discord up. Okay, cool. So starting with what is a contemporary art gallery? So a contemporary art gallery, like in today's terms, is typically understood within the greater art world as a commercial art gallery that's typically operated by an art dealer who really specializes in the display and sale of contemporary art. So unlike museums or public institutions where work is not for sale, as a general rule of thumb, many galleries, contemporary art galleries, will not charge admission for the public. This is largely kind of due to encouraging attendance by critics and curators and press. You know, you wouldn't charge people to come into like a boutique store. It's kind of similar to that. So many galleries, in terms of like their business model, will take a percentage of sale from the artworks that they help facilitate to sell. Typically, those percentages would be negotiated together with the artist and gallery. You might hear that 50-50 is a typical kind of share between an artist and a gallery, but depending on the gallery, depending on the nature of the relationship, this can really kind of fluctuate. So galleries are also known to represent artists, meaning that they aim to have long-term agreements with artists to nurture their careers. So many kind of big galleries that you might be most familiar with, like David Zwirner, Pace, Gagosian, ones that have been historically around for a little while. You'll see on their website that they have like a roster of artists, and it's like a general assumption that they represent those artists. So Pace represents like 111 artists, I think. So quite a lot. And representation is totally according to size of the gallery and like bandwidth and availability to space, all these kinds of things. Okay. So delving into kind of the various spaces within the art world and how it can kind of work with a gallery. So starting with a museum or an institution, as we mentioned previously, a museum is typically a not-for-profit. They're not selling the art that's being hung on the wall. They frequently will have a permanent collection. Sometimes to earn money, they might sell a piece of their collection to an auction house. They're also open to the public, just like contemporary art galleries are. Sometimes you might need to book an appointment depending on the size of the art gallery. But museums and institutions known to be generally pretty open. And their goal is to really communicate and preserve tangible heritage. So that's where the importance of curation really steps in for museums. So then we've got private collections. So this is usually owned by an individual or organization. So a gallery might have a goal to either sell to a museum/institution or a private collection. Pretty ideal. Now, a lot of private collections will loan works to museums or institutions. They might be open to the public sometimes, but not always. And they might also be involved in some private art dealing. And then we also have auction houses. Now, auction houses essentially also function on the kind of primary market level. And when I say by primary market, that means that the artist can go straight to the auction house and sell a work of art if they really desire. But they also work on the secondary market, so you might get a private collector, a museum or institution, or even a gallery offering a work by a contemporary artist to go up for sale. And then we've also got, the kind of function of an auction house for a contemporary art gallery is that it's a pretty valuable resource to understand like an artist's price point. So frequently you can look at various kind of artist sales history through auction house websites. And that's kind of how it functions. And you guys might be familiar with Sotheby's and Christie's, but there are auction houses with all sorts of different sizes all around the world. And they've always been a pretty helpful resource for those who specifically look at artworks as kind of a tool of investment. But they also will sometimes put on curated exhibitions, which is pretty cool. And then we also have kind of art dealers and advisories / creative agencies. So an art dealer is very similar, obviously, to an art gallery. So I would describe like an art gallery is typically run by someone who may describe themselves as an art dealer. However, an art dealer might not necessarily have like a gallery with a curatorial program. They might know collectors, they might know artists, and kind of do deals a little bit more kind of without having the additional role of putting on, a big kind of physical gallery show. Art dealers are also frequently associated with people who have access to like rare secondary market works. You've got like a lot of specialist art dealers from who like specialize in impressionist and modern art. I know from when I was living in London, there were a lot of really great art dealers like from that time period that had much smaller spaces, so they kind of had less emphasis on creating big display and gallery shows, but they were able to deal and acquire and kind of sell art to very bespoke interested groups of people, and had a pretty good awareness of like access of inventory. Then we've also got advisories and creative agencies. So this is kind of more of a like a service that a company would provide to an artist. So they would work with an artist on project by project basis. They might also represent an artist, but it wouldn't encompass the same kind of, it might not encompass gallery exclusivity. But they wouldn't have like a physical space where you could have a gallery exhibition show every few years. So definitely like different trade-offs and different kind of pros and cons with both. I've worked with many artists and many kind of art advisories and agencies, and I think they're like a really incredible resource for a lot of artists nowadays, and really great for kind of management. Just gonna see if you guys have any questions so far. Lovely. Okay, now we're gonna go into the history of an art gallery and kind of some big art gallerists. I'm just gonna have some coffee. Okay, so I've picked three very big dealers that we could delve into: Paul Durand-Ruel, Peggy Guggenheim, and Leo Castelli. But first, let's go a little bit further back and discuss like the actual history of galleries and what they do. So the actual like examples of exhibitions of art operating similar to like current galleries first appeared in like the early modern period, around like from the kind of late medieval age to like 1800s. So in the Middle Ages, that kind of preceded that period, painters and sculptors would be members of guilds, and they would seek commissions to produce artworks for aristocratic patrons or churches. So kind of similar to how like a government would commission an artist to produce, propagandic work, or, any public types of artwork. So that would kind of be more of the model of the early modern period, right? Now, commercial art galleries were kind of more well established by the Victorian era. It was really made possible by an increasing number of people trying to seek objects of their own cultural and aesthetic value, and also kind of an increase in wealth at that time period. So at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, there were also really first indications of modern values regarding art. So as an investment purpose versus just like pure aesthetic or something for a religious value. And there was also an increased attention to living artists as such an opportunity for investment. So there was kind of a period throughout the 1700s where mainly wealthy people would really seek art from Greco-Roman times, and that kind of began to shift. Um, so starting with Paul Durand Ruel, so these are kind of big gallerists slash art dealers I'm going to really touch on. But just so you know, there are many, many more who made a big difference in the kind of role of the art gallery and art dealer as we know it. So starting with Paul Durand Ruel, he is known to really champion the Impressionist artist at a time where the Parisian salon were really dominated the taste of collectors. So if you guys are unaware, the Parisian salon was a big art institution in Paris that had very specific ideas on what great art is. So it was typically like a work of art that referenced history or the Greco-Roman times, and they literally had like a caste system of what was seen as like the most high value art and what was seen as the most low value. Now, the Impressionists were not very in vogue because they would paint en plein air. They were, using modernized tubes of paint to go out and paint landscapes. This was not it for the Parisian salon. Paul Durand Ruel was already a pretty successful art dealer before that, but he really aggressively believed in these artists, and he started to establish more of a professional career and philosophy based on kind of being an art dealer and representative of the Impressionists. So his kind of key principles were protect and defend art above all else. Okay. And then the exclusivity of artists' production. So he was like one of the first dealers to really exclusively represent an artist, which was pretty crazy for that time. He also was a big believer in individual exhibitions. So prior to this period, there were mainly a lot of group exhibitions, but not so many individual ones. He also really believed in a network of international galleries. So he didn't just put on shows in Paris, he went around and touched on Germany and London. So that was kind of the first time, I guess, we got a taste of the global art market. He also believed in free access to his galleries, which were in his apartment. He also believed in promoting the artist's work via the press. So a little bit of marketing tools there. And he also believed in art as an investment. He came from an investment background prior to art dealing. So he believed that art should be associated with money, which, is good in some senses, but maybe not always. So he was super influential. He really worked to completely elevate the Impressionists and really change kind of the traditions of like what high art was at that time. And that really just shows that, one kind of person that really believed in pushing a group of individuals can really impact an artist's market, an artist's life, an artist's career. And very similar to Peggy Guggenheim. Peggy Guggenheim was also known for really championing artists like surrealist artists, and then went into minimalist artists and abstract expressionist artists. So Peggy Guggenheim, she of course came from a very wealthy family, and she really went into the kind of Parisian art world in the 1920s. And she always had this dream to, when she was meeting all the kind of really big figureheads in the 20s, she met Salvador Dali, she met Duchamp. She really became immersed in that kind of Midnight in Paris group. She actually always wanted to create a museum, but first she tried to be a successful gallerist. She opened a gallery in London called Guggenheim Jeune, and she put in a bunch of kind of surrealist and at that time, sorry, it's quite early for me. I think it was, she did like Kandinsky and some of those kind of particular artists. I know she also did a group show of women artists that was very commercially unsuccessful. By the by, she basically was putting on these shows that were pretty challenging for the time. And at one point, she even would purchase back the artworks so that the artists that she was working with didn't think that the works were unsold. So she would basically say, like, oh yeah, the whole exhibition sold out, but she wouldn't sell a single work. She would actually just purchase them and tell the artist that she did sell them. She was like, this is pretty hard to try and sell artworks to a kind of closed thinking society at that time. But that's how she really kind of nurtured all of these artists, and she's very well known for then starting her museum, Art After the Century, after she fled Paris during Nazi occupation. Art of this Century was more of a museum in New York, and from then on she started to apply to give certain artists stipends, like Mark Rothko. So she really had this kind of position as she was a gallerist, but she was also very much a patron. But it goes to show she really kind of set a precedent as like one of the first individuals to really support artists in this kind of stipend way. And yeah, lastly, we've got Leo Castelli. So Leo Castelli was also a very kind of monumental in the abstract expressionist movement in the 1950s. So he was known to really influence Larry Gagosian, who he met in New York when Larry was just kind of starting off. So in 1957, Leo Castelli opened galleries on Madison Ave and Fifth Ave, and in the mid-1960s, throughout the 70s, he was very commercially successful in the New York art world. He was like one of the first galleries to showcase European surrealism, probably very impacted by Peggy Guggenheim's kind of was one of the first dealers to bring European surrealism to the US. He showed Wassily Kandinsky and other European artists. And then he also really pushed, American abstract expressionism, Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, Cy Twombly, Jasper Johns, as you can see in that great picture there. So by the 1958, Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns had joined Leo Castelli's gallery, so signaling a really big turn away from abstract expressionism towards pop art and minimalism. And at this time, you really saw a lot of museums starting to acknowledge like contemporary art more seriously. MoMA was by the 50s and 60s pretty well established by then, and they were acquiring works by living artists, which is pretty incredible. So like when you think about museums having contemporary art, like this is still a very, very new element to the art world, and a large reason for contemporary art acquisitions in the first place is kind of dealers and of course the artists themselves, but this kind of visibility that they're getting at this time. So Leo Castelli, in terms of like his business approach and relationship with artists, so he really saw the importance of interpersonal growth and like not so much of a transactional relationship between artists. So he really wanted to disperse from like the antiquated system of 50-50 splits. He really would defer his kind of percentages according to each artist relationship. He would really nurture artists, and he was known to have like lifelong relationships with the artists that he worked with. He also was very much tracking like fluctuating markets. It was very kind of had his eye on the art market, was very kind of forward thinking in terms of even supplying like supplies and studio space to artists. He also believed in galleries as a space to encourage dialogue and the importance of a gallery also being a kind of curatorial space as much as a commercial space. He also very much believed in the groundbreaking notion of an artist as a marketable brand. So we very much see this nowadays. I'm sure you guys are all learning about how to market yourself and present yourself on social media. Well, this was also on the mind of artists back in the day. However, it kind of was a little bit more of the responsibility of the gallery, kind of getting your name in the press and making sure um, that you were just known to the general public. So that's the history of the art gallery. So you can see kind of a scope of how these three individuals, amongst very, very many others, really kind of started to set a precedent for working with artists closely, creating financial models, and things like that. So this is a really fun picture of Peggy Guggenheim's Art of this Century. I just wanted to show you guys because I obviously worked there and not here exactly. This is no longer exists, but you can see how she was like exploring with really fun ways to display art, like this weird kind of hanging, so you could fully walk around the painting and like see the back of the canvas. The lighting was pretty insane, and also like two works were like 10 different years apart. So she was pretty radical with her display choices. So you've also got these people who are challenging notions of curation and display, which I always found really, really exciting. And it's something I definitely look out for when I go to galleries. All right, I'm going to check if you guys have written any questions quickly. Oh, lovely. Cool, I'm just checking up on your messages. What kind of advisory can an artist expect when working on a project by project basis with an advisory/creative agency? Could you give an example? So I specifically have a friend who has worked for an agency where like a artist will pay a monthly fee, and they will basically like have connections with, let's say, museums or other galleries, and they will introduce the artist to like various opportunities, be that like an art gallery opportunity, museum opportunity, perhaps like if the artist is interested in design kind of opportunities, like let's say a collaboration with a sneaker brand, they kind of introduce that artist to a breadth of opportunities, and like the team that works within the art advisory would be like working to actively seek opportunities for the artists that they represent. So you'll have researchers that work there. You'll also have people who are cultivating relationships with museums, press contacts, and things like that. So functions a little bit similarly to a gallery. Um, but yeah, they're really kind of like your creative agent, if that makes sense. So I guess like the way that I would also compare it to is like a Hollywood star. I don't know much about Hollywood, but I guess a Hollywood star would go have their own agent who would try and find them opportunities to like star in movies, from what I understand. So kind of like an art agency would look for opportunities for an artist to have, exhibitions or public opportunities, things like that. Let me know if that makes sense. Um, okay, so types of art galleries. You're probably going to see like a lot of different opportunities to exhibit your art and like lots of different models, and that's because we're at a really exciting time where like art gallery models and art gallery structures are being challenged, which I think is great and that's healthy and it's how it should be because we need to continue to develop like the way the art world runs generally. So you might have heard the term mega gallery. The galleries that are typically associated with mega galleries don't really like that term too much just because it sounds a little bit daunting, and people want like all galleries should be approachable and accessible to everyone. A mega gallery is typically a space with like a gallery that has four or more locations internationally and represent like a large quantity of artists. You can see Pace's huge location in New York right here. We do have like four different gallery floors that have different exhibitions by each artist. So we have frequently associated as a mega gallery. And we do have lots of international locations. You've also got kind of your general commercial art gallery. This can be any type of size, like Pace is also a commercial art gallery, but that kind of typically refers to the fact that the gallery has a commission structure, perhaps a curated program, a program of represented artists. They typically go to lots of art fairs. They will work on external projects for artists, and they will have pretty robust PR and marketing campaigns surrounding like their exhibitions and their artists. Another thing to actually kind of mention about mega galleries is the directors are typically highly influential, so they would be kind of historic art dealers. A lot of bigger art galleries, though the kind of directors typically will head on submission boards for art fairs or will be actively involved with museums and stuff, so they kind of have a little bit of a bigger, wider influence there. So a vanity gallery, so this is still like, this is actually from my research. I had not met an artist or come across a vanity gallery before, but it's worth you guys knowing. So apparently these guys charge, they will charge you to exhibit in their space, but it's different from hiring out the space outright. Because I think that they would first invite the artist and then they would encourage you to pay a fee. So if you decide to do this, just keep in mind that these gallery spaces, they wouldn't be very proactive in like marketing your art, and you know, because their venue is like created by anyone who is really willing to display their work. It's not like a curated program as such. So on top of that, they also might like charge you to promote the exhibition as well. So if you're looking for like a more commercial art gallery and you get into a conversation and they start to say that you need to pay like an upfront fee, a kind of traditional contemporary art gallery won't tend to ask for that, just a heads up. But that's apparently called a vanity gallery. You've also just got kind of general exhibition spaces and shops. So small scale museum shops, I think, are a great opportunity to like sell prints of yours, especially if it's like you've created a print or something an interesting design that kind of relates to their exhibition program. It's a great way to get some exposure or earn some money. Same thing with kind of smaller scale shops in like big cities. I think that's another great way to get some exposure. But I think, you know, those also that commission model and that kind of fee structure will also fluctuate a little bit. But, you know, kind of keep in mind also like the price point, that if you're trying to sell some smaller works to like and reach a wider audience from a coffee shop or a more kind of boutique gallery space, keep in mind that you might not want to price your artworks like thousands and thousands of dollars. You might want to keep it in the kind of like $500 to $1,000 range or something like that, so you can kind of be accessible for whatever audience you're trying to reach. Now, you also have got the development of artist-led galleries. So through the past few decades, you've seen multiple success stories of artist-run galleries, which I think is really incredible. So you've heard of like Galleria Plan B, initiated by Adrian Genny and Mihai Pop. So basically, artist-led galleries are where artists and collectives start up a gallery or exhibition space on their own. So, you know, pretty self-explanatory, but anyone can set up a gallery. You can find property and kind of deploy any type of model that you see fit. And I think that's always super interesting and exciting. Okay. So here's some very useful reading on the art market if you want to take a screenshot. I think the contemporary art market is really confusing, and sometimes it can be kind of like, I mean, as someone who's been trying to grow their career within the contemporary art market, I feel like I've certainly needed to, I feel like I've been missing something at certain times. Like, you know, how did this happen? Like, why was there a banana taped to the wall? Why is it so hard for certain galleries to get into art fairs? How do you get into a museum? How does this all work? If you want just like a greater scope of the contemporary art market, I suggest reading some of these books. If you want to learn a little bit about art dealers specifically and some of those gallerists that we spoke about, and some of like the kind of most prominent gallerists today, I highly recommend reading Boom. So yeah, feel free to screenshot. I'm also going to check if you guys have any questions. Oh, I think we definitely are seeing artist-led independent spaces, and I think like we are really very much believe in that, but I also do see that there's so much to learn from like specifically curators and art dealers and people who are, really know the space. And the thing about like artist-led independent spaces is it might be harder to know, like, okay, you might not have like access to collectors, or you and your kind of friends might have access to similar collectors. I would suggest, if like you're doing an artist-led independent space, to also try and seek curators and have a really kind of really robust networking plan, things like that. Because the great thing about working with a gallery as an artist, I think, is being able to learn a lot from the people who work there. Um, I definitely think we'll see an increase in artist-led independent spaces, and I think more importantly, we'll see maybe a change in like the business models of how some galleries already work. Okay, I'm just having coffee. Continue. Moving on. Okay, so roles in an art gallery. So this obviously is totally dependent on size, and there are lots and lots of galleries that will literally just have like one person doing everything, and that can like, and definitely that works very, very well. I know like a lot of extremely successful galleries have literally one person, like the founder, who does a lot, and then they'll have like a few kind of shipping and handlers. But in terms of like a bigger art gallery, if you're curious of what kind of makes up big space like Pace or Gagosian, some of these bigger spaces, this is kind of what we're made up of, right? So you've got your senior leaders. So this will typically be like a CMO. You'll have multiple sales directors or senior partners. So a senior partner could be someone who joined like the founder at a pretty early stage. So they're typically like viewed as senior partners. Now, the like, just like for context, the oldest art galleries that really exist in like contemporary art galleries are like Gagosian, Pace, and Zwirner. So like Pace was established in the 60s. So we're still pretty, it's still like the founder of Pace is still alive and kicking. So we're still pretty fresh and young company in a lot of ways. So you've also got, of course, your founder and your CEO that kind of makes the bigger decisions. Sales team is absolutely incredible. Um, absolutely, what's the word? Well, they are exactly the whole kind of business structure. The business structure relies on sales of the artworks. So that will consist of sales directors, and then it will go down to sales associates, and then it will go down to sales assistants. So that's specifically what they're doing, is to nurture clients, meet with the artists, understand the artist's work like the back of your hand, be able to sell and believe in it, and they'll also travel a lot to go to art fairs and meet clients and maybe meet artists. But there's usually also, depending on the scale of the gallery, there's also like a curatorial team. So many times the curatorial team will also be responsible for working very closely with the artist, and kind of telling their story, things like that. And that brings us to communications as well. So communications team will be, press relations, thinking about marketing campaigns. We also have got like imaging and events team that falls under communications at Pace, because communications kind of, in a lot of senses, is like the public image of the artist and the gallery. So really like very, very careful strategies go around the communications, the like greater communication of our artists, and really trying to get their story out there, trying to get as much foot traffic into the exhibitions as possible, as much interest. So yeah, very, very kind of careful work is done there. You've also got the exhibitions team, and that might be this the curatorial team that I had previously discussed. And then you've also got like the art resources team. So you've got registrar. They specifically deal with all of the crazy taxation laws that are international. We don't have to worry about that too much with NFTs, which is been a pleasure since I've been working in the art world. Like most recently, it's just like I never really think about tax because I've always been selling digital artworks, which has been very fun. So, but taxation is an absolute huge part of this role. You've also got shipping and art handlers. I have this amazing video from when I was at David's Werner at an art fair, and there was this one sculpture, and it was basically an Indian. No, it was an Egyptian bust. And there's this video I have of the art handlers like slowly putting on a pair of glasses onto this Egyptian bust, and it was like the most like they were shaking trying to get it so perfectly. And I've seen, the way that they will polish and handle Jeff Koons works, which are very, very breakable. Um, it's a very stressful job to be an art handler, so shout out to the art handlers. Um, uh, Now, going into research and archives, this kind of department is really important for specifically galleries that have a strong kind of academic program. So PACE is just like curatorial residencies, and we have a really big research and archives department and a beautiful library, and that's because we also work with a lot of historic artists and artist estates, and we also have a pretty robust publications department, which I love because there's so many great art books that PACE has published. David's Werner Books has also got an incredible books department, and even the gallery I used to work for, Gazzelli Art House, they had only been around for the past 10 years, but they produced books for their artists and their exhibitions, and that's a really, like, if a gallery can afford that and can support that, it's, I think, a really incredible component of the gallery because, we work so closely with the artists, so it's pretty great. And then you've also got operations, so HR, all that fun stuff, but a lot of galleries don't have that. Okay, so I spoke about David's Werner Books, so I actually was very close with the head of David's Werner Books during the pandemic. I was nannying for her, and she was working on this book, How to Make a Great Exhibition. It was the first children's book that like literally takes you through like how to set up an exhibition at a gallery, and I just thought this was such a great kind of graphic. It's the graphic made by the artist is named the illustrator is called Rose Blake, and you can see like, okay, this is exactly what it really takes to put on an exhibition. This is from like a museum perspective, but it's very easily applied to galleries as well. You've got the development director, so someone who is specifically raising money to put on the exhibition. We don't have to do that as much in a contemporary gallery, but you can see an events assistant, the events team. It's incredibly important to really get the public excited. And a museum guard. I've definitely been there. Museum guards are super important. At the Peggy Guggenheim, I had to guard this Alexander Calder artwork that children kept blowing on to see it move. So, everybody's very important within this kind of role. And I love it. Okay, so actually before we delve into PACE, I want to talk a little bit about tips when you're working between an artist and a gallery. I think now is a good time. I thought I had a slide here, but I don't, but that's okay. Maybe I can show you guys my face for a second, now that I've woken up a bit. Do you feel pace of forward thinking, and do you like physical to support digital work? Oh, that's such a good question. I might delve into that towards the end of our conversation. Okay, I'm going to turn on my camera. Okay, I've woken up a little bit more now. So before we go back into a little bit about PACE, I want to touch on some key things to keep in mind when working with a gallery and when reaching out to galleries. So firstly, when approaching galleries, and I'll kind of get into how to approach galleries like a little bit later on, but remember to take it slow, especially when you're approaching a gallery that's pretty established or works with a lot of artists. Try to take it slow. It does take like gallery long time to plan an exhibition program, and like curatorial programs are usually very carefully selected and decided. So if you are in conversation with a gallery and things are taking a little bit longer, um, don't worry, like it will happen naturally, and the right gallery, I'm sure, will come to you. Um, uh, yeah, so just keep that in mind. It's usually nothing ever personal. Um, so understand kind of the nature of the relationship when you start working with a gallery. So I think, it's a very personal when you work really closely with galleries and artists, because your artwork is who you are, and it's your lifeblood. And like part of what a gallery has to do is really try and sell your artwork. So, always remember that even though you're working very closely together, trying to keep that professional business relationship, make sure you're always signing contracts. The agreements are all very clear when you begin working with a gallery. And yeah. Next is make sure that you are really kind of transparent, and make sure the gallery is being transparent. So make sure, kind of as like a good business practice, you're really understanding kind of what you're signing up for in terms of exhibitions. Sometimes it's good if an art gallery says that you have an exhibition coming up, maybe you get a contract in the books, or a consignment agreement out there, just because it's pretty important. Like I've had heard of artists who've started to create work for an exhibition, and then suddenly the gallery changes their plans, and then you've got this huge inventory, and you've spent all of this time and money on producing artwork. So make sure that you just have a kind of really communicative relationship with the art gallery. Another super important thing when you start looking for galleries to approach and start working with galleries is just make sure you research, which I know is a term for us within Web3, do your own research. Really make sure you know the other artists that they've worked with. Maybe reach out to the other artists that they've worked with. Make sure that the artworks that they're showing, um, make sense for you and like your career. Like you really, it not only will you be more successful in trying to connect with that gallery, but you really want to make sure that that gallery is relevant to you. And I think also just like always reach out to the other artists who have worked there as well, just to like touch base. Sometimes it's a little bit nicer to get that kind of background information. I also really, you know, I'm a big believer in like don't sign up for presentation until you've like worked with them or done an exhibition with them first. So like either in a group show, or maybe you've done a residency, or like you've been working with them really closely in terms of like selling works. Maybe they've reached out to you to like sell one of your artworks, but it's good to like make sure that you've had some kind of history of working with them, just because you don't know how anybody works until like obviously you start working together. It's the same thing with artists. I've like very much frequently started working with artists, or galleries have started working with artists. Just good to know how people work before you start signing anything. Okay, and then also if when you start working with a gallery, last point is like physical traditional galleries think really long term. So we're not like thinking about next 5 months. I know that Web3 can be really fast paced sometimes. So think about when you begin conversations with an art gallery, they're going to be thinking more long term. So make sure that you have a little bit of an understanding about where you want to be within the next 5 years rather than, the next 5 months. Um, so think about your big ambitions and kind of what you really want to achieve as an artist, like big picture wise. And I think that's a little bit more kind of traditional galleries will be really care about. I certainly care about that quite a lot. Okay, moving on back on to Pace. So Pace is a big gallery. We represent like some major artists like David Hockney and Koons and Agnes Martin. But the great thing about Pace is that I've realized upon joining from a kind of smaller gallery is that they also very much are artist first. The dealers work really, really closely with the artists that they're kind of assigned to. So how it works is Pace will have multiple art dealers or multiple kind of directors, and each person will have like, 1 to 7 artists that they work very closely with. And so you're kind of like a mini art dealer in yourself. So that's how we managed to represent all these kind of bigger artists and estates is, it's kind of split up between our big team. So great thing about Pace is we work with both modern and contemporary artists. So there's like a lot of history, and you can draw like a lot of connections between the contemporary artists and some of the historic artists that we work with, which is really exciting. So now here's kind of how it really works, like within the kind of Pace Gallery's structure. So you've got the artist and the artist estate. So that's when a kind of consignment agreement will come in. So just so you guys know, a consignment agreement, I had no clue what this meant when I first joined the gallery world. A consignment agreement is basically where you give like right to ownership in a way, or right to sell. So it's a legal agreement that gives the gallery the right to sell any artworks. It will also typically cover the right to like have your artwork in what is it, like, where it's like marketing and production. So you're giving the right to show like images of that artwork as well. And then you go to exhibitions, and then you see this part here, that's sales, and then that goes to collectors and museums. And then you also have some kind of, if we don't exhibit an artist that we specifically work with, we might work with a consigner or a lender or something like that. So you can kind of see like the core kind of focus of like what we do as a gallery. So like support art making, that's pretty obvious. We very much support culture and mediums that really push boundaries of culture and kind of speak for our time. Like we'll get into that in a little bit about kind of our role within technology. So advocate for and facilitate institutional museums and collections. This is like, I think, the grail for a lot of artists. Like, of course, you want to know that your artwork is going to live on and be in the public eye for your, for the rest of history, ideally. I think as an artist, I would definitely, like, my biggest goal would always be for a permanent museum acquisition, and that's definitely something that we really push for. Also, just promoting awareness through media coverage. That is a big role of the comms team. And then very much focused on building a market for sales. We are, commercial. We will be looking at auction records of our artists. You'll frequently see that certain galleries will acquire artworks by artists that they represent at auction for like millions of dollars. So, some may view that as market manipulation if, but usually there has to be another bidder, right? So maybe it's not. But like art dealers are definitely active in the auction kind of market. And as I said, that's a big marker for the kind of commercial market for an artist currently. And yeah, we also bring artworks to market. So we'll sell to lots of other spaces, but main goal, collectors and museums. Okay, so you guys might be familiar with Pace and Pace Verso because of what we've been doing within the world of Web3 for the past few years. So I was very much aware of Pace before Pace Verso existed, but I really appreciated Pace as even before they launched Pace Verso, my awareness was always that they were like a little bit like a more kind of innovative gallery. I felt like that was always a big part of the brand name. And when they kind of launched Pace Verso over a year ago, I just thought what they were doing was super interesting. And basically, the way Pace Verso was really established was because a lot of the artists that Pace has worked with became really interested in doing NFT projects. So that's kind of an example of Pace taking one of the needs of a represented artist and seeing, what we can do with that. And if that means creating a whole new department in a gallery, that's they did, and I think that really shows how kind of artist first Pace can be. Now, I was going to say something else. Let me have a sip of coffee. Okay, it'll come back to me. So Pace Verso and our kind of background and capabilities. Um, so Pace Verso is really like the only mega gallery, as we said, like a gallery with multiple big spaces to really staked a claim in the Web3 space, which I think is super important, super inspiring. I think, oh, actually, I remember what I wanted to say. The history of Pace with kind of working with artists that work with like new media art actually goes like dates back really to its inception. So when I joined in January, we had done an art blocks release by an artist named Robert Whitman. And Robert Whitman also had an exhibition, a physical exhibition on at Pace. And I had learned that Robert Whitman, together with Rauschenberg, together had established EAT. So that stands for Experiments for Art and Technology back in 1969. Now, Robert Whitman is like one of the gallery's like longest represented artists. Like he was really, really early, and he was known for some crazy performance art. He was always really interested in like space. So his work always pushed traditional mediums at a time where, painting and sculpture has obviously dominated the past 50, 60 years. And I just found it incredible, like when I joined, that Pace really did have this very strong kind of roots within its history to really push artists who were using experimental mediums. And I think that really speaks for kind of the development of Pace Verso as a sector of the gallery that has really pushed artists to use Web3 and blockchain as a tool, and also has like encouraged our exploration into generative art through our partnership with Art Blocks. So I digress. We've also, like a big part of Pace Verso is to really try and onboard our kind of traditional collectors into more into Web3 to really understand the power of blockchain. And we're really trying to like cross those two kind of avenues. We've really created a great relationship with a lot of kind of crypto collectors in the space, which is super exciting. And we still have like a robust amount of collectors who are interested in learning more about the world of Web3. And we also had a really big exhibition in spring 2023 of Tyler Hobbs at Pace in New York. That was like one of my first big projects upon joining, and it was super exciting to see Pace working with an artist who is so kind of associated with Web3. And like if you ever look on Pace's website, you'll see like all of these articles about how Tyler's like inspiration from Agnes Martin, and really trying to we really contextualized his work within like a kind of more traditional art capacity, rather than, I think there was a lot of previously there's a lot of written text about Tyler as like an NFT artist and things like that. So we really focused on his interesting use of form and abstraction, and really tried to present him as we would any other kind of Pace artist. So there you can also see a few press articles. Everyone was very excited when Pace Verso launched. Let me see. Guys, have any questions? Great, thank you, Emily. Yes, that's exactly it. Guys should new collectors seem to want to show more shows like Tyler Hobbs, anything surprising happening, demographic. Okay, so demographic was majority traditional collectors. Exciting. Did anything surprising happen? Good question. NFT NYC as well. So we definitely had like a lot of our kind of friends in the in the crypto community coming by who are a little bit more familiar with Pace Verso and like collect a lot of our art blocks work. So that was a pretty great opportunity. I would say what was really great, we do these big walkthroughs of the exhibitions with our whole gallery team at the start of each show. So that means you've got like good 100 plus Pace staff walking around learning about the exhibition. And Tyler was leading that walkthrough. And I think maybe for artists that can be pretty intimidating because the Pace staff are all very smart and cool and interesting. And I could just tell I felt like because when you work so in depth, like in this art world, and I think like I'm very familiar with generative art and how his processes work. If you aren't aware, the exhibition was on QQL. Sometimes you wonder, like, okay, but are people gonna get it? Like, is this gonna resonate with everybody else? And I could tell as I was looking around the room that all of the Pace staff who generally come from really great like art history backgrounds or business backgrounds, they were all like, yes, like they were all really into it, and that was super, super exciting to see. So I think it was a big success. And now I feel like, yes, Pace is very like forward thinking towards NFTs. We definitely have used like NFTs to support physical works. Actually, for Tyler's paintings, he used something called IYK chips. So he created paintings out of his QQLs. So obviously QQLs are like native to blockchain. So QQLs like they have to be minted through his website. So he minted his QQLs and created paintings from them. So of course, when he sold the paintings, he wanted them to be connected to like the NFT, of course. So the IYK chip allowed for that in a pretty kind of simple way. The IYK chip just links directly to the work, directly to the NFTs. If that makes sense. You guys should definitely look into them. I think they're the most successful physical to digital example that I've seen so far. Okay, slowly wrapping up. So these are all of the kind of spaces that, and also this could have grown because I first created this in the autumn last year. But I think there's so many like incredible spaces and opportunities. These are all the spaces that I think that like NFTs and digital art on the blockchain, whatever you want to call it. All of these spaces that support this medium that we work within, I think, are really challenging gallery structures. I studied internet art at university for a bit, and like the internet artists were in the 90s were having the exact same struggles that I think digital artists were still having in 2018, where it's like, how do we find physical spaces to sell our work? How do we exhibit it? How do we commercialize this? How do we make it palatable? Well, I think that all of these institutions, plus many, many more that I'm sure aren't covered, from press outlets to DAOs, to NFT museums and other galleries, and of course vertical crypto art. You know, these are all really like innovative spaces created by incredible curators and art dealers and all of these alike. And the models and like the business structures of a lot of these spaces are so different from the way traditional art galleries work, and I think that's super important. One thing that I've always found really interesting um, about like Web3 is I think like the impact of curatorial DAOs. I think that will really change the way, or it could change the way museums, select artworks. I think it could really change the way contemporary galleries decide to represent artists. I think DAOs are a huge way forward in terms of just making this whole system more democratic, in terms of like how artists are selected for certain spaces and certain opportunities. But yeah, and I think wrapping up. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab some water. So, how to begin a relationship with an art gallery. So, I've already touched on this a little bit, but just to like put it in summary for you guys, this is also like my opinion. I feel like there's so many ways you can begin a relationship with an art gallery, and this is also again speaking in terms of like traditional art galleries, contemporary art galleries, of all sizes. Although, if you're still at like a pretty emerging point in your career, I think and you haven't worked with an art gallery before, I think it's good to look for like a slightly smaller gallery, one that's like a little bit more, I don't want to say accessible, um, but typically like the bigger and more established galleries, those artists tend to have like a little bit of a history of working with galleries before they work with like Pace or Gagosian or David Zwirner. Um, Also, as like a very young artist, it's pretty rare. I don't think we represent like a whole lot of like younger artists. So like, if you're in your 20s, really don't try and like select one really big gallery and be like that's the be all and end all. I think it's good to really try and look at all different sizes and really find exactly what you're looking for. So that kind of goes with the first point. Do your own research. Find a gallery that really aligns with your practice. Look at their curatorial program. Look at the other artists. Look at their submission process. Very frequently, this is like totally inaccessible because like galleries aren't super clear about like how you can begin working with them. Um, so, nothing hurts to just like visit the gallery and be like, hey, you guys are taking submissions right now. Um, you don't need to you don't need to bring your portfolio. I've definitely been there where I've been at the front desk of a gallery and an artist has come in and I've gotten like a whole presentation of their practice and I'm like, this was really great, but I'm actually not the decision maker here, So just know the submission process. Try not to like do do that, even though it was very fun for me, but it just might not be as productive. So talk to people, also make contact. So depending on whether they said to email you or they have an open call, make that initial contact. I also think like it's so important to network. So try and like connect, like go to their openings and try and speak with the people who work there, build a relationship with them, even if it might not be the director of the gallery. Like, you know, everybody who works at the gallery wants to grow anyways. So if it's important, like, I'm just a big believer in having a big network in whatever industry you work within, and to nurture those relationships because you never know what kind of opportunity might come along. Um, and always make sure that you have your portfolio or website ready for when you're ready to have that conversation. I think a lot of digital artists sometimes might just like give. I've gotten just like a Twitter account before. I think sometimes that can be a little bit less helpful if you have like a website that has a CV, an artist statement. That can be much more helpful, and it can also be geared towards much more heavily towards a traditional art audience, of course. So in terms of following up, as I mentioned, remember to be patient, and like it's not. There's so many galleries out there. There's so many people who want to work in this space. Like other opportunities will come, even if you found a gallery that you really like and you haven't heard from them, or they might have said, hey, we're not taking new artists right now. Just don't worry. There's so much out there, and it's so important to just focus on your practice, and other opportunities and staying positive. Surround and then also like do residency programs, like connect with other artists, put together group shows, create shows yourself. I think to be active is very important. You don't need to have like an established name every year to legitimize yourself being a productive artist. So say yes to lots of opportunities, but not too much that goes beyond your bandwidth. And yeah, that's the end. So, do you guys, let's go into some more questions. Okay. Part 5 to bring live in AR film for fine art NFT collectors. I've actually never. Oh, no worries. Um, uh, Art Vive AR. I actually haven't heard of them. I've heard of Vive. Seems cool. I have worked with artists who use AR quite a lot for, but not this specific one. That's cool. Is it a new thing?
Can you hear me, India? It's Sarah from
Yes.
Sunglasses.
Yes.
That's great. So,
Not sure I can hear you anymore.
so I've just deafened and undeafened. Can anybody hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing on so many levels. I've got like 3 pages of
Oh,
notes, and
amazing.
it's nearly 11 p.m. in Melbourne, Australia. So I'm sorry about the the finger trouble with my messages.
No,
Um,
no worries.
so so Archivive is an app, and it's quite extraordinary. So last year we produced a 12 series collaboration on Nifty Gateway, which is
Cool.
one of the blue chip, platforms you might know, with an amazing guy called Nate Hill, who's also on Object. He's a good friend of ours. He's based in Melbourne. And for the fine art collectors of our work, which were NFTs, we then released for them prints, as in fine art prints, and they were activated through Artivive, which meant that when they actually used their phone to click on the print that we delivered to their homes in LA or San Francisco or London or Paris, wherever they were, the actual animated piece that was an NFT came to life. And I found that
Cool.
a really, yeah, well, exactly. That is kind of like a really cool way of integrating physical with digital. And so I was just
Yeah.
sharing that with the
Is it
group.
activated through a QR code?
Yes, exactly. So Artivive is the app. I'll send it to you in a private channel if you like.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Please
uh,
do.
yeah, but I just wanted to say
Great
also
segue.
on everything else you said, my gosh, exhibiting our work in museums like the Museum of Old and New Art in Hobart, which is who we work with,
Mm,
exhibitions around the world like Art Basel. It's great that we're able to bring our contemporary NFTs to this space. So thank you so much. I won't take
yeah,
up time, but
absolutely.
thank you.
No, of course. And if any of you like have any questions about art galleries or I didn't touch that much on art fairs, but I've been to quite a lot of art fairs. So if you ever have any questions about whole experience is like and what it can mean for you as an artist, we can talk. But yeah, I'm super bullish, as they say, about the space. I absolutely love art and technology, and I really believe in what blockchain can do for the art world and can do for digital art. And yeah, I think, congratulations again to everyone. And idea for an artist to contact galleries in other countries too, or is it better to focus on galleries which are closer? Such a good question. Um, I think, it's good to first focus on like home turf if you don't have an exhibition history. I think if you haven't exhibited anywhere before, I think it's good to get some experience like working and expense wise to start local and exhibit like close to home, easier to also kind of get that practice building relationships first. If you already have a bit of a like an exhibition history and you've already been working with some artists, I mean some galleries, then I think why not? It might be just keep in mind if you email a gallery your portfolio They haven't clearly said that they have like an open call or anything. You might not get a response, especially if you reach out to like a medium-sized gallery, let's say in New York. So I definitely think like that they say, especially like accepting submissions, 100% reach out wherever in the world they will be. Should be no boundary there. But I think if you're doing a bunch of cold emails, just sending your artwork, sending your portfolio, just be prepared that they might not respond, and that's okay. Um, uh, Definitely when you're like, if you're ever traveling around, if you're in London, unfortunately, the art world is still very like focused on big cities, and like I think the global south is obviously left out in they have like a lot less of a presence in museums and art fairs, but that's definitely changing, and I think that like that the art markets are growing in places like Mumbai and Sao Paulo, and like art fairs are springing up in even like Texas. Super exciting. So definitely think. I guess that wasn't a very clear answer. Definitely reach out to any type of gallery that has an open call and they're marketing that. If you send any cold emails, just don't be too bummed out if they don't get back to you, and they're not like geographically to you. Okay. Okay, so how did you handle transferring Tyler's NFTs to traditional collectors? Did you set up crypto wallets for them? Did. It kind of depended. Set up a ledger, and that was very productive. I'm trying to think about the other ones. A few of them already had NFTs, but were they already had wallets, I believe, that we set up like one ledger. At least from my team. I think then my colleague also set up a few others, but I would have to ask specifically. It wasn't as difficult as you would expect. I've definitely set up my previous gallery as well a lot of wallets for collectors, and it's sometimes was hard to choose, especially like early 2021 when I was still learning the ropes myself. So you would receive. You select artists from submissions. How do you meet artists normally? So for Pace specifically, we don't take like artist submissions. I think a lot of people who work at Pace also do like independent, curation themselves. So it's a great way to, if there's any opportunity for like smaller fringe exhibitions. So there isn't so much as like a submission process for Pace anymore. The gallery that I previously worked for had a residency, so frequently, like, it wasn't uncommon for artists who participated in the residency to, then potentially go on to working with the gallery for more physical exhibitions or to eventually, become represented. So that was like a pretty good loop, kind of starting point for the gallery I previously worked with. How I meet artists normally, I know a lot of the artists that I know now through the residency that I used to manage in London. So that was an amazing way that I met a lot of like digital artists, which was super exciting. Right now, what I'm really trying to focus on is nurturing my relationships with collectors and trying to see how we can get more traditional collectors to acquire new media artworks. I'm a huge believer in that. And then I think hopefully after, as a gallery, really want to, as a the gallery and like someone who works within a gallery, you want like just as much as a robust relationship with collectors as you do artists. Hoping to grow that, and then potentially, curate shows of myself in the future that are hopefully very commercially successful for everybody else who's involved. Um, and really very much meet artists like always at events in New York. That's where I'm based now. I go to so many exhibition openings. I go to a lot of Web3 events. Try and be very social. Lots of fun. I want to start a gallery, an NFT native gallery. Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think that blockchain technology, like NFTs, shouldn't ever be like necessarily the curatorial focus, be all and end all of like a gallery program. But I really do believe that if I were to ever sell digital artworks, I would, of course, like, if the artist hadn't already minted their works, like out of pure security and like provenance purposes, I think it's really important to mint works. And so I guess, like, in a way, sure, it could be NFT native. If it was purely like a bunch of digital artworks, I would definitely make sure all of them were minted on chain. Did I go to NFT NYC? How was it compared to 2022? Experiences were very different from both times because I was coming from London in 2022 and I was just like networking, and I was there with an artist who I worked really closely with, and I was going to a bunch of events. Here I was working, we had our own event for Tyler Hobbs and I was preparing for that. So it was like totally different. It was so much fun like both times, but I was obviously like preparing for an event at NFT NYC is very nerve-wracking. You're like everything to go so well and to make sure that everybody comes. There's a lot of attrition at NFT NYC events because there's so much stuff going on. But it was a huge success, and we amazing events team at Pace, so we were super happy with how it all went. Um, and I think, I actually didn't notice that like, there was a different attitude in terms of like, because the market has obviously been fluctuating quite a lot. Everybody seemed very excited and thought it was great. I love NFT NYC, honestly. Um, yeah, okay. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, I'm going to start my day. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to listen to me. If you got up early for this, that's amazing. I hope you guys feel free to reach out to me anytime. You can reach out to me on Twitter. I also have a Calendly with one-on-one time. Um, uh, and yeah, if you're ever in New York, come and meet me for a coffee or anything. And yeah, I hope this was useful. Cool. Guys. Oh, thank you. It was nice. It was nice meeting you, Yinga. Thank you again for your flexibility.